Welcome to Valente Brothers TV, directly from our headquarters in North Miami Beach. Today we're gonna present the third episode of our Jiu-Jitsu history segment. We have talked already about the prehistory of Jiu-Jitsu, the origins of the techniques. We talked about the history of Japan through the Edo period, talking about the Civil War times, eventually the peaceful times in the Edo period, how that impacted the history of Jiu-Jitsu, especially the samurai warrior and the influence of the samurai warrior class in Jiu-Jitsu. And today we're going to talk about the modernization of Jiu-Jitsu, which is connected to the modernization, the westernization of Japan through the Meiji period. Meiji in Japanese can be translated to enlightenment. Pedro, how did this time influence the history of Jiu-Jitsu?
Yes, Japan went through a major transformation with the Meiji rule, with the return of the rule of the emperor who took the name Meiji. As you said, Meiji means enlightened rule. And it had to do with bringing Western technology, Western values to Japan. Obviously, there was great advancement in Japan at this time, but also there were problems because the Japanese people, in the beginning of the Meiji Restoration, began to reject their culture and everything that they did prior to the Meiji Restoration. All their arts, all of their culture. A brief historical summary of that period: the American fleet under Commodore Matthew Perry arrived in Japan and forced Japan to open
The Yokohama port,
the
if I'm
ports.
not mistaken.
Yes, and forced Japan to open its ports for international trade. Japan had been closed almost entirely, with a few exceptions, for over 200 years with the Tokugawa regime, the Shogun era, the Edo period. And as they opened, the Japanese people were exposed to a new reality and all the advancements of the Western world, technologically speaking. And they became, in many ways, ashamed, embarrassed of their lack of advancement, of their lack of technological advancement. And so that had an effect on how the Japanese people saw their own culture, and an immediate transformation of Japanese society, now starting to dress like the Europeans, started to their educational system, and most of Japanese society began to change. The problem is that Japan had many wonderful elements in their native culture. One of them was the samurai culture, which included the practice of Jiu-Jitsu. The samurais had to surrender to the imperial army and they ceased to exist. Many people don't know that there were 2 million samurais in Japan at this time. And this created a big social problem because they lost their jobs, lost their livelihood. Many of them went to be part of the Japanese army, which was being formed.
They were part of a caste system.
Correct. And
once in Japan.
And once the caste system was broken, many of them did not have an opportunity to make a living outside of military law enforcement activities. And many of them were participating in Jiu-Jitsu matches for entertainment against sumo wrestlers, amongst themselves. At this time, already before the Meiji Restoration, in the beginning of the 19th century, the practice of Jiu-Jitsu as a competition sport gained force. That's where the grappling techniques were greatly developed and modernized based on different samurai clans, different Jiu-Jitsu schools, competing in grappling against each other. And slowly, with the Meiji Restoration, the reputation of Jiu-Jitsu was tarnished, and especially the nobility of Japan started to look upon Jiu-Jitsu in a bad way because of these matches for entertainment, many times for money connected with gambling. Many times these matches had prearranged results, and the Japanese people saw this as dishonorable, and Jiu-Jitsu became, Jiu-Jitsu lost its reputation in Japan, and not too many people were practicing. And a German doctor called Erwin Bowles, who came to Japan, many people consider that he introduced Western medicine in Japan. He was actually the doctor for the emperor. He saw the value of Jiu-Jitsu as a physical activity. He felt that the university students in Japan were becoming very sick, and that exercise was very important for them, for their wellness. He didn't see Jiu-Jitsu as a practical art of self-defense. That was not what he understood as the main benefit. He understood Jiu-Jitsu as a great form of exercise to help the Japanese students become more healthy. And he started promoting the practice of both Ken-Jitsu under Master Sakakibara and Jiu-Jitsu for the students in the universities of Japan.
Ken-Jitsu, the art of swordsmanship.
Yes.
Right? Swordsmanship. So, but Pedro, I think it's important to comment on the fact that this change, because one of the objectives of historical studies is to learn from the past so that we don't repeat mistakes in the future. And at least in our own lives and within our groups and families, if we cannot maybe impact the world, at least I think all changes start in a small way, and eventually they can grow, right? That influence can grow, hopefully. But there was a very rapid and radical change in the Meiji Restoration.
Japanese society.
Right?
Yes.
The pendulum shifted too fast, maybe.
Correct.
Right? To the point where the German doctor, Erwin
Bowles,
he probably felt that it went too much towards just the academic side, towards the intellectual side, and he felt the necessity to create some balance through Jiu-Jitsu.
Going back to the Japanese concept
through physical education, in this case, Jiu-Jitsu.
And going back to the Japanese concept of Bunburi-Odo.
Correct.
Which is that you have to always combine, that the way is in the combination of both the physical activities, in this case self-defense, the martial activities, and the intellectual, literary activities.
So let's get back to the timeline.
So at the time, Erwin Bowles was teaching at Tokyo University. And there was a student at Tokyo University called Jigoro Kano who was promoting the practice of Jiu-Jitsu. He also felt, as a student of Jiu-Jitsu and a member of the Japanese nobility, that Jiu-Jitsu could have a very important benefit for Japanese students, not only at the university level, but even younger students in the school system. And he was teaching Jiu-Jitsu, but he felt a huge resistance, the same resistance that Erwin Bowles felt. The fact that a German doctor, a Western person, was promoting Ken-Jitsu and Jiu-Jitsu was instrumental in the Japanese people starting to once again look at Jiu-Jitsu as something that could be practiced. However, Jigoro Kano felt that the reputation of Jiu-Jitsu was so tarnished that it was best to create an alternative name.
Hey Pedro, it's fair to say that it wasn't just for the reason, and you've touched on this, but just to make it very clear, it wasn't just because Jiu-Jitsu had lost its honor and its respect through the new ways that the old samurais had to find to earn a living. It was also because the Budo, right, of Japan lost a lot of credibility, since Japan had to pretty much surrender
the Bujitsu,
to surrender to the Westerners. Correct. Through the United States naval
military prowess,
supremacy. They just saw that what they had been doing was no match.
That was embarrassing for them.
Correct. So just a quick.
That's true.
Parentheses.
And Jigoro Kano felt
we're already coming to the end of this.
Sure, but Jigoro Kano, he didn't create, as I said, that was not the right word. He utilized the term that already existed. He didn't feel that it was right to use a new word, because he didn't feel like he was creating a new art. He said this several times. Judo is just a new methodology for Jiu-Jitsu, using the principles of Western science, scientific methods of teaching. So it was a teaching methodology for Jiu-Jitsu, more organized, more safe, and something designed to be taught most specifically in the school system. So it's one of the earliest cases for rebranding. He just took the second character, Jitsu, and he substituted for Do.
Which the way...
Because that's what he said. It's not just about fighting. It's not just about two people competing with each other. He felt that that was the way before, and he wanted to continue with the competitive element in a safe way, but most importantly, add philosophy, add a way of life, so that the purpose was human development more than fighting, in his point of view.
And this probably was the reason why it became accepted in the school system.
Yes.
And we'll continue in our next episode talking about that and much more. Thank you so much.